Denmark, Sweden, and Norway all rank inside the top 10 happiest countries on Earth. Almost every year the ranking gets published. They also rank near the bottom of the developed world for hours worked per week. Most people hear that combination and assume there has to be a catch somewhere. Less effort, less output, that's supposed to be the trade. Except Sweden is home to Spotify, IKEA, and Volvo. Denmark is home to Lego, Maersk, and Novo Nordisk. Norway runs one of the largest sovereign wealth funds on the planet, built almost entirely on disciplined, unglamorous decision-making, rather than anyone grinding themselves into the ground. Something doesn't add up if working less is supposed to mean losing. Before we go on, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far this story travels. And if you're loving it so far, join the family by hitting subscribe, because tomorrow, we've got something special lined up just for you. So today, 15 things Scandinavians simply refuse to do at work, and why refusing to do them keeps working out in their favor. Habit number 1. Answering email after the workday ends. In Denmark specifically, an email sent to a colleague at 9 at night isn't read as dedication. It's read as a scheduling problem that belongs to the sender, not an emergency the recipient needs to solve before bed. Most workplaces don't even need a formal policy against it. The social expectation does the job on its own. If a message can wait until morning, it waits until morning, and nobody apologizes for not answering it sooner. Habit number 2. Letting vacation days expire unused. Denmark legally guarantees 5 weeks of paid leave a year, and the striking part isn't the number. It's that people actually take it, all of it, without treating it as a favor they owe their employer an explanation for. Astrid, a mid-level project manager at a Copenhagen logistics firm, takes her full 3 weeks every July. Nobody on her team reads that as a lack of commitment. They read it as Tuesday. Habit number 3. Staying late just to be seen staying late. Presenteeism, the idea that visible hours signal value, barely exists in Scandinavian office culture. Leaving at 4 or 5 when the work is genuinely done isn't a quiet act of rebellion. It's simply what the day was built for. Staying past that point tends to raise a different question entirely, which is whether something went wrong earlier in the day, rather than whether the person cares enough. Habit number 4. Hoarding credit in a group project. Scandinavian workplaces lean hard toward flat structures, and one side effect of flatness is that individual glory-grabbing reads badly fast. A win gets described as the team's win, publicly and specifically, even when one person clearly did most of the heavy lifting. This isn't false modesty for its own sake. It's a functioning incentive system where people keep sharing information freely because nobody's worried someone else will walk off with sole credit for it. Habit number 5. Running a meeting without an agenda. Calling a meeting in a Danish or Swedish office generally means sending out what's actually going to be discussed beforehand. That single requirement quietly kills off a huge share of meetings that would otherwise exist purely to fill a calendar slot. If there's nothing specific enough to put on an agenda, there usually isn't a real meeting hiding underneath it either. Habit number 6. Public criticism of a colleague's work. Feedback in Scandinavian offices tends to be blunt and specific. But it happens in private, one-on-one, not in front of the wider team, as a way of establishing who's in charge. Humiliation isn't treated as a management tool. A manager who corrects someone publicly is more likely to damage their own standing in the room than the standing of whoever they were correcting. Habit number 7. Eating lunch alone at a desk. Scandinavian offices, especially in Denmark, tend to run on a shared canteen lunch with a real, enforced start and stop time. Eating at your desk instead isn't just unusual. One workplace researcher who studied Danish offices specifically has described it as genuinely strange behavior there, not merely uncommon. The shared block gives the whole day a fixed anchor point that the rest of the schedule quietly organizes itself around. Habit number 8. Deferring automatically to a job title. Scandinavian hierarchies run flatter than almost anywhere else in the developed world, and that shows up in small daily moments. A junior employee disagreeing directly with a senior manager in a meeting isn't unusual or career risky. It's expected. The person with the most useful information in the room gets listened to. not automatically the person with the biggest title on their door. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Habit number 9. Checking work Slack during the school pickup. This one connects to something structural rather than just cultural. Danish workdays are deliberately built to end before the school day ends, so a parent leaving at 4 isn't sneaking out early. They're following the schedule the entire system was designed around. Checking a work message mid-pickup isn't seen as impressive multitasking. It's seen as being somewhere without actually being there. Habit number 10. Treating unpaid overtime as a badge of honor. Overtime in Scandinavian labor markets is closely governed by collective agreements, rather than left to whoever's willing to work the longest for free. Roughly 2/3 of Danish workers belong to a union, and collective agreements cover the large majority of the workforce, whether they're personally union members or not. Working extra hours without extra pay isn't framed as loyalty. It's framed as a negotiating failure somewhere upstream. Habit number 11. Networking purely to extract something from the relationship. Professional relationships in Scandinavian workplaces tend to hold up over long stretches of a career, partly because they aren't built transactionally in the first place. A coffee with a colleague from another department isn't a favor bank deposit. It's just a coffee, and the trust that builds from 100 small, low-stakes interactions like that tends to outlast whatever any single ask could have gotten faster. Habit number 12. Tolerating a manager who checks in constantly. Micromanagement doesn't travel well in a culture built around flat hierarchies and mutual trust. A manager hovering over every task is more often read as a signal that something's wrong with the manager's own confidence than as a sign of a demanding, high-standards workplace. Autonomy is closer to the default setting, and it's treated as something a manager has to actively justify taking away. Habit number 13. Working through a sick day. Sick leave in Scandinavian countries tends to come with strong protections, and, in several cases, employer-paid coverage from the very first day out. Pushing through an illness at a desk isn't admired as toughness. It's more commonly read as a decision that's going to cost the team more later, once whatever's going around spreads to 3 other people sitting nearby. Habit number 14. Arriving late to a meeting because your time outranks the room's. In a flatter hierarchy, showing up late doesn't read as a display of importance the way it sometimes does in more status-driven office cultures elsewhere. Nobody in the room is presumed more valuable than anyone else purely by title, so there's no status payoff waiting on the other side of walking in 10 minutes behind schedule. Punctuality ends up being the boring, unremarkable default, rather than something that has to be enforced from the top down. And habit number 15. Letting work quietly expand to fill however much time gets handed to it. This is the idea sitting underneath every habit before it. Give a task an entire open-ended evening, and it tends to eat the entire evening, not because it genuinely needed that long, but because nothing forced it to wrap up sooner. Give that same task a real, honored stopping point, and it gets compressed down to whatever actually fits inside the time available. Scandinavian workplaces apply that principle deliberately, across an entire economy, instead of leaving each individual to rediscover it alone at 11 at night. 15 habits, and the same thread runs through all of them. None of this comes from working less out of a lack of ambition. It comes from treating boundaries as things that actually get honored, rather than things that get stated in an employee handbook and quietly ignored by everyone, including the person who wrote it. A workday with a real endpoint forces sharper decisions about what belongs inside it. A meeting with a real agenda cuts the ones that never needed to exist. A title that doesn't automatically win the argument means the best idea in the room usually does instead. That's the story, for now. If you found it worth your time, subscribing and hitting the bell costs you nothing and helps more than you'd think. Another one's coming tomorrow. Thanks for watching.